lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Manny.
And today we have two very awesome creators on the channel. We have Matt Wagner and Kelley Jones, and we're going to talk their new Kickstarter, which is absolutely blowing up. Dracula the Impaler, book one of a planned trilogy, I believe, or is there four?
There's four.
I'm very excited to talk about this with you guys. It's so cool to see like two heavyweights come and just show all the young people how to do it right, so I'm very happy to talk about the book with you guys. Also, real quick shout, love that you made $666 the goal.
Yeah, I love that too, man. Nice.
And we limited our signed and numbered editions to 666 copies.
Nice.
And we announced it on Friday the 13th. So we're flirting with disaster.
Yeah, yes. Love it, dude. Love it. So first off, real quick, just want to talk about how this project came about and why this project for you both.
So Kelley and I have known each other for years and years and years. And we always had this longing to do something together. We did one Grendel short story a while back, but that was just an 8-page short story at a time when I was doing tons of short stories with lots of different artists. We wanted to do something significant, something that would just be our big mark on our careers and the industry. About a year and a half, 2 years ago now, I had posted some on Facebook, and Kelley kind of responded with that same old echo, hey, we got to do something together someday. And I had been brewing on this Dracula stuff for so long. I've been a big fan of the book and the various film adaptations for years and years and years, and I had a take on it finally. So I contacted him and said, are you serious, man? Because I got something that I think would be just the perfect collaboration for us. And what I have in mind is, at this point, it's mapped out as 4 graphic novels. Who knows? Maybe we'll do more, but at this point, it's 4. But that's a commitment of 4 to 5 years, to end up doing that. And Kelley responded positively.
And I did. I know anything Matt does is going to be 1, original and 2, brilliant. You know that. So when he said Dracula, even though that's a character, most famous guy ever in literature, so I knew when he said that I didn't know how grand he had it in his mind, but I knew it'd be different. And when he told me on the phone, basically the gist of what the first story was and what the others would be, and that they were all very big stories, all separate, but connected if you read them all. It was just, obviously, he'd put a lot of thinking in this, beyond just how good the story was. And it wasn't just good, it was great, because there were things in it I had never thought of, things I had never considered, things that once he said them, I desperately would want to see. And if it's hitting me that way, I'm thinking anyone else it's going to hit that way. So it was easy to go all in. I mean, at that moment, it was just all easy in terms of any decision of dealing with it. As an artist, you wait and hope that you'll get something like this. And I've been fortunate enough to be on really good things. And this came along, and I think I just thought this is the greatest thing. It is the greatest thing I've read.
This is a good time to point out that what we're talking about here is not an adaptation of the novel into comics. No. There are already a ton of those. There's like almost too many. But anybody that's a fan of the novel knows what a compelling and magnetic character Dracula is. He's hardly in the novel at all, aside from the first scene where Jonathan Harker goes to his castle in Transylvania. That's where he's kind of on stage the most. Once he makes that transition to London, he's gone. You hardly see him at all. As a kid, I loved Dracula. Out of all the monster archetypes, you basically have, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman. I always liked Dracula best, but I always wanted more Dracula, And there's enough hints, there's enough information in the novel that I found that we could weave this huge amount of stories about his history, about the times when he's off screen, the story behind the stories, the story that's in the shadows of the novel. And boy, couldn't ask for a better collaborator than Kelley to do that.
Yeah, I think what Matt did was write this in a way that the real trick here is he's a he's a terrible, horrible, wonderful person, right?
Mhm.
Never does Matt let you forget that. Even when you feel seduced by him yourself, and I would go about this thinking, oh, you start to get, and then he would do something, and you realize he's being consistent all through this. Dracula is consistent all through this, and what he is not colored by becoming a vampire. It colors the vampirism,
Mhm.
and that in and of itself makes it utterly compelling. He becomes such a fascinating character that though I'm buying the popcorn to see all the mayhem, I became completely involved with this character. And that's something I hadn't done before, drawn a full up villain as the point of view, the center of everything. Matt has experience in it, but I hadn't. As
I was just going to point that out. I've got
Yeah.
a little track record with this.
Right. So I found that a big challenge. And how do you do this with you? I mean, you always have to try to find some kind of connection point with this character, or any character you draw. You have to have some kind of connection, not just, or it just becomes two-dimensional.
Mhm.
And the drawings become two-dimensional. The story to everything becomes two-dimensional. Matt had written him so fully formed, fully developed, everything there, and without any bias whatsoever. It's just, this is the guy. Look at him, deal with it. And whatever he does, Matt doesn't moralize. He doesn't go on and on. He just, these things happen. He leaves it up to the reader. And that is incredible juice for an artist.
When we talk about that limited time that Dracula's on stage in the novel, I like to make the analogy to Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. He absolutely captivates everybody in that film. He's on screen 16 minutes out of that whole 2+ hours runtime. Dracula's the same, and boy, don't they have a lot of similarities. They're extremely charming. You get almost hypnotized by the way they speak and their kind of aura, and then you realize, oh shit, this is a really dangerous motherfucker.
And they eat people. So
and they eat people.
Yeah. You can't forget that.
What Matt also did was he removed any of the Hollywood or other kind of stuff, romantic quality of him.
Mhm.
He's not, it's all about him. It's all about what he thinks is the right decision. He thinks he's doing, he firmly believes he's doing the will of God, not realizing he's just doing himself. There's nothing in there at all that makes you think of any of the recent incarnations, or in general. I've not seen this Dracula before, and I've read him in Stoker, but I haven't seen this before, and that's thrilling unto itself. I think it charged my art, honestly.
We got a good stroke of approval on this when we first announced it. I got a response on Twitter from Leslie Klinger, who is considered one of the world's foremost Dracula scholars.
Mhm.
And has written extensively on Dracula. Wrote the newest thoroughly annotated Dracula. So I contacted him back and said, "Hey, oh man, that's terrific, and we would love to show you the book and see what you think of it." And he gave us a cover blurb that was just glowing, where he said it's wholly convincing and thoroughly canonical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I like the quote too.
A+ from the professor,
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. Don't read this without a lot of garlic and crosses at hand. Too. Another good quote.
One question I wanted to ask both of you. You guys kind of touched upon it, but individually for each of you, what made Dracula so compelling to you guys personally as a character? Because obviously he's a character that you said is arguably the most popular character in all of literature. You can show Dracula to just about anybody or mention the name and everyone immediately knows who it is.
Knows who he
But for
is,
you guys specifically, like, what was the emotional connection or the connection as a creator that you had with the character?
Cal, you want to start that?
Sure. I first became aware of him, obviously, as anyone does, as a kid watching the Lugosi film. As a little boy, and then later the Lee stuff. I was terrified and fascinated at the same time, and I didn't understand too much about him when it was explained to me, he was I was little kid, and there was some other kid dressed as him. I didn't know what it, and I was explained he was a vampire. I didn't know what a vampire was, and they said he drinks blood, and that grossed me out. He's dead and he drinks blood. It was later on, my dad, in passing, when I was watching one of these movies, and I can't ever remember which one, but my father in passing said, well, he was a real guy, and he just said it like that. And I was young, and I went, no way. Usually when something's based on a real guy, the fiction is far more gruesome. This was the other way around.
Yeah.
So when I finally got the In Search of Dracula book by Raymond McNally and Radu Florescu, it was absolutely as compelling as reading Stoker. And the fact that he was doing these not legendary things, they were documented historical things. And they were brutal. And he came from the place they said he came from. He lived in the places. He did these things. He was called a vampire because of his gruesome earned reputation. So at that point, he became, most monsters there's a sympathy for. Wolfman, you feel bad. Frankenstein, you feel bad. You feel bad. The Creature of the Black Moon. Dracula, you're afraid of the whole time. And that's his, that you want to keep that. I didn't want him, and Matt did it. I didn't want him romantic. I didn't want him
and the best film versions portray that as well. Of course, Nosferatu, he's just this feral creature. He gets taken down by a virginal woman that kind of sacrifices himself, but you never feel like he's in love with her. He just wants to consume her. Christopher Lee's portrayal also very very feral. It's one of the things I didn't like about the Coppola version. Coppola was quoted as saying that the original novel isn't a horror novel, it's a love story. No, it's not at all. Not at all. That's not evident in the book at all.
Unless it's about him loving himself.
Yeah, right. I, like Kel, I first became aware of Dracula quite young, and I think, Kelly, I looked it up. I think we were both about 10 or 11 when The Count first premiered on Sesame Street.
Yeah, I remember.
Of course, that was a ubiquitous presence,
Yeah.
But I think one of the, I keep telling people that aren't as of Kelly and I's generation that before there was VHS and before there was video on demand, you had to go through the TV guide every week and studiously look up all these horror movies you wanted to see, and then stay up late at night to see them. And in fact, I'll never forget this one rare Tarzan movie a friend of mine and I wanted to see, and it was on at 4:30 in the morning.
Oh wow!
We stayed up. It started. We woke up 2 hours later, and we had missed the whole damn thing. But one of the ones that, of course, Dark Shadows and Barnabas Collins was again a ubiquitous presence because that was on every day. But one of the first film versions that I think kind of meant a lot to me was the Dan Curtis produced TV version starring Jack Palance, because again, it was on TV. You got to watch it on TV, during prime time. And there again, that was a very feral version of Dracula. That was the very first one to introduce the concept of him having this reincarnated love, that he thought Mina was the reincarnation of his lost wife. Script by Richard Matheson, who wrote I Am Legend, by the way. And then I distinctly remember reading the book because I was very familiar with these film versions, and our school library had a paperback copy of it. I've since tracked it down. It was from Dell Books in the mid-'60s. Your viewers can go check this out online easily. And what really intrigued me about it was the illustration of him on the cover is how he's described in the book. So his skin is so pale, it's almost blue. He has this big mane of white hair and this big giant white mustache. And that was just incongruous with every other version of Dracula I knew. So that absolutely captivated me, And again, just been a fan ever since. Just Dracula's my groove.
Yep. Well, I remember reading the book after I had there was a great old record store near where I lived, and they had tons of old records there, and in it, in the spoken word section, they had Christopher Lee reading from Dracula.
Was it just him reading, or was it
just him? It's like two record set and they're long playing, and it's not the whole novel, but it is
Yeah, it's an
fabulous.
abridged version. Yeah,
It is. And I remember buying that because I knew Christopher Lee as Dracula and I didn't know anything about the novel. It led me to go get the novel because I found it compelling when he would read it. I mean, I was mesmerized by it. And so when I read it, I really, really loved it. And there was so much genuinely good horror in it. And at that point, I became like Matt, just a big fan. Actually, I was a fan of the a lot of these films, the book and the historical one. It was just this all-purpose love for all things Vlad.
You guys mentioned a lot about like the visual representation. So how important was that when you guys were developing your version of Dracula? And was that like a real collaboration between you two? Like, how did you guys kind of decide on the look for your Dracula?
I don't think we didn't discuss it much at all. We just knew we wanted it to be the book version, and Kelly early on popped out a handful of sketches, and it was just like, yep, perfect. You know, that's the way we're going. The mustache is the big deal.
That was it. As long as you do that.
And Cal, real quick, and in the book, you get the feeling that he has that mustache to hide the fangs.
Yes.
You know, even though Vlad in the original paintings and portraits of Vlad the Impaler, he has a big giant mustache, but in the book, you get the feeling it's because his fangs poke out, like you can see them. It's not they're not these tidy little things that it's easy to hide. They're just like in the way, you know, badass teeth.
Yeah, I think Vlad back in 1470, if you were a man and masculine, you had a big mustache. That's why he did it. Ours is to hide the teeth. It served a purpose for him, and they don't retract, and they're there, and that really adds something to him, to me, that you know they're there the whole time. So no, when it was easy. Matt had written him so fully formed, so much characterization in these things, every page right from the start, that you could see him. I mean, you just could see him.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of my approach to the script. Is the first book is about how he becomes a vampire, but he already has to be the Dracula we know before, you know, he makes that final transition, and I feel like we really pulled it off. I mean, you know, it's the whole first volume's based on an obscure reference in the novel. Van Helsing spends a lot of time talking to our motley band of heroes in the novel about vampires, about Dracula, about their powers and limitations, how you kill them, that sort of stuff, how you drive them off.
Yep.
And there's a throwaway line, actually it's mentioned twice, that presumably while he was alive, Dracula attended something called the Scholomance, which is a Romanian legend about a seminary for the dark arts way up in the mountains that is hosted by Satan himself. So Dracula went to school with Satan before he became a vampire. And the tenure at the school was 7 years, and Satan would take on 10 students at a time and end up keeping one of them, is how their legend ran. You know, I just thought, how come nobody's ever done anything with that? You know, that's a terrific thing. And my other big creative aim was, I have to come up with a way that he becomes a vampire in some extraordinary fashion. It can't just be that another vampire bit him, because that's fucking boring. And not only that, it makes him victimized, you know, and he's not a victim. And so we got all that, you know. It's he's not romantic. He's unapologetically cruel and evil, and he becomes a vampire in a very special way.
I got a question about why you guys decided to do it through Kickstarter. I mean, you guys have both worked for pretty much every publisher out there, and I'm sure you could have probably gone any route you guys desired. So,
sure.
What is this? Is this your first Kickstarter, and then why Kickstarter?
It is our first Kickstarter. You know, I've kind of been at the forefront of indie comics since they began, you know, and Kickstarter's just become another way to put power in the hands of the creators. And that's something I've been all about since the very beginning. And I just felt like, you know, I want to try that someday. And this just seemed like the perfect spot to do it. And it's, as you said, it's working out. The campaign's going great.
Yeah.
I will say we had a lot of help. We're working with a group called Superfan Promotions, and they've been just, oh my God, invaluable, leading us lost sheep through the dark forest.
Yeah. No, I think when I was reading it and we were discussing where this would go and how we would do it, pretty selfishly, I wanted it through crowdfunding only because I didn't want any interference with what Matt was doing, and selfishly because I wanted to draw it. I didn't want to worry about what was going to be okay and not okay to put in. I wanted it to go where it was going to go, and not have someone come in and say, well, this might offend someone, or this might bother someone, or this could, I wanted none of that. I think what Matt was writing was such just this unbiased portrayal of someone beyond its Dracula. Just there he is, and this is what happened. And Matt didn't go into it and put anything of our times or our way of thinking. So it really reads as just a fascinating story. Then you add supernatural stuff.
Yeah, I tried to keep it, again, any sense of modernity out of it, And
Yeah.
for instance, here's a nice little aside, something I ended up changing very, very recently. And we had already had the book completed for a while, but somebody had read it. We gave it to, we're constantly looking for some feedback. And there's a scene where some soldiers, very derisively, one of them says, on your way, faggots.
Yeah.
And somebody said, the use of that term faggot took me out of that time frame, stopped me and made me think in modern sense. So I changed it. I was like, well, that's a fair enough point. I understand that,
And
you got another way to say the same thing without that contemporary slang,
You find the same thing. Not
like there hasn't been derogatory slang about homosexuals since the beginning of time. There has been.
Or anybody.
Yes, exactly.
And so I'm really big on learning something or feeling something when you especially if you do something that goes back in time or historically. It isn't our time, so it's fascinating culturally. It's fascinating, like a time machine. You go back and you see this stuff, and it has more impact because you realize at that point, at least for me, what people lived through in those times. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. I mean, it's how you look at it. But that's interesting. And that's, if there's a thing Matt does that I really like, it's he's voraciously scholarly on things. So he will know where everybody was, what everyone was doing. I mean, it's an enormous amount of research he did. And it all comes through, and it's not dry. It's a living thing. It becomes alive. It's not just check boxes of, oh, we got it right. It's
right. The research is in service to what's going on,
Yeah.
Kelley always describes my writing as literary pulp.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh
Pretty
yeah,
good description.
I'll take that. That's
Yeah.
good.
That's on point. That's an on point description
Yeah.
for sure. I want to mention, because we haven't talked about him yet, but the third collaborator on this book, Jose Villarrubia.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah, I wanted to
my
ask
God.
about him too, man.
His coloring is like some of my favorite. I mean, I just finished his restoration he did on the Swamp Thing by Wien and Wrightson, and like, I think it might be the best I've seen an absolute edition.
Yeah.
So
it was that job that you're talking about there, Ryan, and the fact that he had also done some restoration for Dark Horse's Richard Corbin library that's coming out right now.
Mhm.
And that made me specifically think about him right away, because I've talked about this before. I've never really liked the way people color Kelley's art. They get too dark with it. They want to be dark and moody, and Kelley has already provided all of that in his line work.
Mhm.
As a result, I think you need to color his stuff very vibrantly, very bright, so that you get to see all that line work. You get to see all the shadows, So when we contacted Jose, first of all, when I told him what we were doing, he was like, oh yeah, I'm on board with that. I said, look, Jose, we're looking for something vibrant. I said, we think about it as an Italian giallo film. Specifically, think of Suspiria by Dario Argento, and another one we very specifically pointed him to was Black Sabbath by Mario Bava. Both of which are color scheme wise are lit up like neon pinball machines, and yet they're spooky as shit, but there's there's, you know, vibrant greens and purples and blues and yellows everywhere you look, you know.
Yeah.
And boy, he took that and ran with it. He did just a tremendous job.
Well, yeah, I remember he was so good. When the pages would first come in, I was knocked out immediately. I was in a state of shock of how much I like this. Matt had told me this before, kind of his philosophy on how he thought I should be colored. I said, sure, that's fine. What's good is then Matt could also notice things that needed to be fixed or tweaked, because I would have just said, it's fine, it's good, just do it, because it was just knocking me out. I wasn't used to seeing all my work like that. I wasn't used to seeing all my lines. I wasn't used to the blacks being bang. They were just even more powerful. And I've always, and I agreed with it because I love really bright color on comics anyway. I'm a big 4-color kind of color guy. I don't like a lot of special effects.
That was another thing. Jose did not do a lot of computer effects. There's
Yeah,
there's a few here and there. But,
and that's fine for storytelling. That's fine.
Yeah.
In selected places, it's fine.
Yeah.
So I, you know, again, Matt had such definitive ideas of the character, how it was to look, the presentation of the story. There were clearly something. I just have a love for the material. You know, I just come in there and go, ooh, I get to do this and it's fun. And then let that part take over. But no, I couldn't. It was so nice to have this thing look the way we had hoped it would. The worst part was we couldn't say anything for damn near half a year.
Sitting on it was killing us.
Oh God! People would ask, "What are you doing? What are you doing?
Look, man, you're doing an interview. Keep your mouth shut, man."
Yeah, and all I would say when people would ask, I say, "Well, I'm working with Matt Wagner on something." So they assumed it was either Grendel Mage or a Batman thing.
Right.
They just would assume that.
Some combination thereof.
Yeah, or something. And I would let them think that. I would just go, well, you know, we're doing something. So I had a bunch of people, a ton of people starting to say, well, it's clear you're going to do a Batman thing. You and Matt are going to do a Batman thing. And the most I'd say is, well, he will have a cape. You know, there'll be a cape in it.
Which I will say is our one concession to the popular visualization of the character. In the book, doesn't wear a cape very much. There's one scene where Harker sees him crawling down the outside wall of the castle upside down, and he's wearing a cloak so that he looks like a giant bat. Yeah. But almost any other time he's on screen, he's not wearing a cloak.
Yeah, I'm pretty much, I have him with a big, like when he's outside, I'll do it. But when he's in his castle, I don't have him doing that, because Matt was right. You want to save up certain things for when we get to the third volume, which is dealing with that. And at that point, you don't want him already looking like what you think he does. That's when he'll come on and be what our take on what he looks like as everyone knows him, which I think will be utterly frightening, because as Matt says, we see him now this way, but that's down the road and he's going to be horrible, this terrible color. And as he comes back to being full-blooded, there's a wonder. You got to think he's been feeding on the same people for so long, right? It's almost incestuous. He needs fresh, something fresh, and to get there, we have to do these stories. They're wonderful. They're absolutely.
I don't know if either of you guys saw the recent film, The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
I have not, no.
So, you know, it's all about the trip he takes from Transylvania to London. And the two things I really liked, it definitely not a perfect film. And I don't know if I'd really recommend it, but if you're a Dracula hound, sure. But two things I really liked about it, you know, in the book, he brings 50 crates of his native soil with him. And any other version where they take the trouble to show that, they're coffin sized, right? It's like 50 coffins, right? This is 50 enormous crates. So like,
oh, wow.
Each one would fit probably 6 coffins inside it. And you're just like, holy shit, he's bringing a lot of dirt.
You gotta wonder how many yards of cemetery dirt is he bringing, man. It's like 4 or 5 cement trucks worth of
and then the other cool part is halfway through the film, the sailors like figure out they hear something, and they open one of the crates, and there's a woman inside. He brought a snack.
I gotta check this out now.
Yeah, I gotta check it out.
It's not perfect.
It was on my list.
Fun stuff in it, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, one more question is, if you guys can, I mean, you said this first volume is sort of about how he became a vampire. Can you hint as to what else What other
Hint,
bits of-
Matt, hint.
Just
Can't
a
hit
little
much.
tiny
Can't hit
morsel.
much. Just that everything will seem familiar, but also new.
Yeah.
You know, everything
Gotcha.
will be like, oh, I didn't realize we needed to hear about that bit.
Uh-huh.
And I will, and in keeping with that, we're about halfway through the second one.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how far along you were,
Yep.
so halfway.
And
Awesome.
it's as Kelly said, he's a completely different character in the second one to some degree, you know, because he's a different stage and different locale.
Well, it's a life-changing or
Undead changing.
changing thing to go from what his objectives are, then to become a vampire and deal with all the positives and negatives of that. And that starts to change him. That was Matt's neat trick, was it's all still there, but now he's got to deal with this. And
his vampirism grants him an enormous amount of power.
Yeah.
Right.
But also a lot of supernatural restrictions.
Yeah.
And
Right.
he has to
Yeah,
deal with
that's
that
true.
too, so
and it makes you think of what would it be like to have to live. But, you know, Dracula famously says there's worse things than death. And Matt does this thing where we go each step on that journey, where this is why it's great he's not a romantic character. It's why you can do more with this. You can do a lot more with this. And
well, and like I said, it keeps him tough and scary. You know, the one of my big complaints again about the Coppola movie, and I don't want to hack on the Coppola movie too much because I love
you love it.
I love the cinema of it. I
Yeah.
love the way Coppola made that film with no CGI,
Yeah,
right.
all these old school cinema techniques that I think are just marvelous. But you know, this whole romantic thing, it's just, there's this one scene where, you know, Harker finally escapes the castle and she Mina immediately rushes to his side at this nunnery in Romania and marries him. And she's been having this affair with Dracula while Harker was captive and has kind of fallen in love with Dracula. And he's kind of like in half beast form, and there are literally just hoses, fire hoses of tears coming down his face, and he's, you know, screaming and crying. And I'm just like, Dracula doesn't fucking weep.
No.
Dracula doesn't weep. You know? And that's kind of my big complaint is, you know, once he gets to London, he's not scary at all. You know, he's kind of this, you know, foppish, looks like he should be the lead singer in a goth band, you know. Like, more woe is me than woe is you, you know.
Yeah, that's true. That was my disappointment when I saw it, because at the beginning there's all this I'm thinking it's going to be actually a marriage between Nosferatu and Dracula.
Yeah, there's lots of good visuals. You know, I love the bit of how the inside of the castle is on the edge of reality. You know, there's illusion is as much real as the concrete and rocks of the castle itself. You know, things drip up, mice run along the ceiling, shadows attach themselves and move all around. That shit's great.
When you see
and then you get Fop Boy Dracula in London, you know, just
yeah, you're right. The old tricks were great. I always liked that he went and actually got cameras from that time and had them restored enough to take pictures with them. You know, it isn't just they took a picture and made it black and white. The only one I can think of who would do something like that was Kubrick for The Shining. He actually did a similar thing, but he was a photographer, and so was Coppola. So they knew their, but that stuff I loved, and that stuff I can sometimes have to turn the sound down and just enjoy it that way, because it is insufferable when he starts weeping and it becomes a different character, you know.
In the end, he cuts off his head and he's redeemed. I'm just like, oh, fucking hell.
Well, I'm super stoked for your guys' version of Dracula. Kelly, we did an interview.
As you can tell, we are too.
Yeah. We did an interview a while ago, and you two told me like that you were working with Matt. I didn't think it was going to be, I thought it was going to be creator owned. I had no idea what it would look like, but I'm glad that this is what you guys came up with together, and the fact that it is going to be multiple volumes. What
I'm super excited.
In terms of, oh, go ahead.
I always describe what Matt's done as this, because it's going to be an enormous epic. It's like the Lord of the Rings but Dracula. You know, it's Dracula's Lord of the Rings. It's this huge epic over time. It's going to be enormous when it's done. And it's one of those things where when you read it, it will, I think Matt's written a definitive version. I think it's that good. I'm reading it. Yeah, it is definitive, and it will be the Dracula all Draculas are measured by. And I probably am underselling it, to be honest.
Well, that just makes me even more excited.
Yeah.
Before I let you guys go, I'm just kind of curious. I know that you're still wrapping this up, but you guys are working consistently on the other books. What is the release schedule? Have you thought about that? Will they always be Kickstarters? Is that kind of the model that you will stick with?
At the current, our current mindset is yes, they will be Kickstarters.
Yeah.
We're shooting to do one per year. That's the basic outline.
Yeah, I just want the freedom of no one saying Matt went too far, I went too far. I just, right now, we look at each other's stuff, and there's never been that issue of going too far.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you give us that kind of freedom, the anything can happen occurs. And I always, I'm much more fan than professional. So I react to stuff like that too. So I always read it and I go, man, I love this. Then I know other people will love it too, because of those intangibles that comics should always be, or any kind of art really should always be kind of a conspiracy to make. And that's what we're doing, is this little kind of conspiracy to just put it out the way we see it, and to hell with the rest.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, everybody listening and watching, make sure you get out there, back to Kickstarter. There's 2 weeks left as of the time that we're recording this. You don't want to miss out. Thank you guys so much for taking time to chat with us. It has been an extreme pleasure talking comics with you guys.
Thank you, man. Big fan of both of you guys.
Thank you,
very long
thank
time.
you, Manny. Thank you both.
No problem, man. You guys have a good day.
You
Bye-bye.
too.